Hello, good evening, everyone, for tuning in tonight. I do apologize for some of the technical issues we had, but you know how these things go. We are on the Real Talk on Men's Health discussion. This is part two. Just a couple of weeks ago, we did a part one. So thank you again for joining us tonight. We have a few guests with us, plus one, same guys as last time. We have Mr. Lamar N. Robinson. We have Duron Tross, Jeffrey Tyler, and Richard Cook. Um, I'm going to allow each of them to introduce themselves. Certainly, if you are interested in anything that we discussed tonight, if you have questions, feel more than welcome to share it in the group chat. So we'll start with Lamar.
Okay. First of all, good afternoon to everyone that is tuning in, or good evening, depending on where you reside. I'm just so thankful to be a part of this platform again. I thank Shanaria again for the fortitude, the insight, and also the courage. I said this before the last two times I was on her first webcast, which was really great. And then we had a second one with these incredible kings that's on here as well. And now we here for I don't want to say the final installment, but it kind of feels like the end game. You know, everyone in some sense has a strong representation of what they love, believe, stand for, and also represent. So I'm just so happy to be a part of this platform. And I want to say, as I often do, really quickly, for those that are tuning in, family, friends, loved ones, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to see what we're talking about and to be a part of this great forum. Thank you.
All right, and Duron.
Um, Thank you, Henry, for hosting this great event. And I'm just honored to be with these three gentlemen and this lady. Again, my name is Duron Tross. I'm no stranger to the Charles County community. Again, my name is Duron Tross. I'm a cyber professional. But I'm also, I work here in the Charles County community as well. And I'm also the owner and founder of Charles County Matters. But most importantly, you know, I'm just, just honored to be here. And thank you for hosting this part two. Hopefully, there's a part three and on and on.
Absolutely. And Jeff?
Yes, thank you so much, Shinyuri, for putting this event together. Thank you to as a Family Health Center, and I just want to thank everyone also for tuning in. I am Jeffrey Tyler, an elementary school teacher. I teach third and fourth grade, and I am also the founder of Good Men Do Exist, a gentleman's lifestyle brand and movement with a mission to change the narrative of manhood in media and in society through man empowerment, through brotherhood, through community, through fashion, through our lifestyle. And so I truly believe that men need healing too. Good men do exist, and that we have a lot to contribute to this world. And we have something to say. We have something to speak about. We want to be good men, want to be good fathers, want to be good husbands, and we have a generation of men rising up now who are using their voices and saying that, hey, we're here and we have a duty to our world, we have a duty to our family, to our community. And also, I am a speaker as well, have also worked in ministry, and I've been married for 10 years now to my awesome wife, Jennifer Tyler. Love her very much. And I just look forward to really having an awesome discussion with these three awesome gentlemen, with these three gentlemen who are making a difference in their communities, making a difference in their families. And I'm excited about tonight.
Absolutely. And last but not least, Dr. Richard Cook.
Good evening, everyone. Panelists, Shinieri, for putting this all together, everyone viewing. My name is Dr. Richard Cook. I'm a board certified internist. I've been practicing medicine for 20 years. 17 of those years have been in Charles County. I've touched the lives and examined tens of thousands of Charles Countyans, but not only in my private practice. Shinieri is doing with this event what I have been doing for a long time and what I'd love to do, and is my most favorite part of practicing medicine, and that is going out to the community and teaching everyone how to be happy and healthy, mind, body, and soul. So I appreciate you, Shinieri, and gentlemen on the panel. I am humbled to be here. And I'm looking forward to an outstanding discussion and even learning a lot of things myself, because I am always working on me as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It is such a pleasure to have you all on tonight as a panelist. I know I specifically chose each of you to be a part of this experience, your expertise, and your different perspectives. So I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion. So we're actually going to jump right into it. If for those who watched part one, we went into all elements and facets of men's health, from physical and mental, emotional, relational, and then spiritual element as well. So I did want to actually get into some of the things that we didn't get a chance to talk about the first time. So really understanding how men are affected, especially from the emotional and relational standpoint. A lot of times when it comes to mental health, when it comes to emotional health, often we are focused more on women and how these elements affect them, but not enough discussion or focus has been on how mental, emotional, and relational health impacts men. We talked about a little bit about how childhood really plays into this. If we really want to get down to the root, why men think the way they do, behave the way they do, how that may actually come from how they grew up and the influences they had. So, again, this isn't directed towards a particular panelist tonight, but what are some lasting impacts that childhood trauma can have on emotional health for men in particular?
Unmute yourself, Duran.
I apologize.
Oh,
I'll go first. I'm very open about therapy, and I am a proponent of it, and I'm in therapy. My childhood, I would think, was great, from a no abuse, nothing like that. The normal, growing up in the '60s and the '70s. Yes, my mom and my dad got after me. Mom and dad divorced when I was about 6 or 7, but I wouldn't call it a trauma because my dad was living only about 8 miles up the road. I saw him every day. He worked in the schools, and my mom as well. So, you know, I would say, it kind of goes hand in hand. But at some point, we were men, as we always, when I was coming up, it was always told to be tough, don't cry, and I hear that a lot going on. And it's crying is a release. It's an emotional thing. It's like when when you drink water, and your digestive system gets rid of the food and water. So when you cry, you're getting rid of some of those bad moods. And I find that men, we bottle things up, and then when it comes out the wrong way. My it's funny. I had my therapist session, telemed, over the phone on Friday, and we discussed some things, just in reference to the campaign. I'm not going to go there. And he asked me, how am I doing? And when I said that, I like, whew. I said, I have a lot of things bottled up that I need to say. And he said, well, let's have this conversation right now with the two of us, so that it doesn't come out in a wrong way and it explodes. But at the same time, I have to have other men. I have friends who I can go to, and I have some female friends I can go to and discuss some things that help me cope with not just campaign, just work, whether it be family, or whether it be my football officiating, or whatever, that I can just discuss and just talk about some things. But we as men, we need to stop keeping those emotions in. If you need to cry, cry. Christ cried on the cross. I don't want to get too religious on someone, but we need to just unbottle some of those emotional situations. Just talk about it, and it's okay to cry. Make yourself vulnerable.
Am I unmuted? I'm on. Can you hear me? Great. So
Yep.
first of all, I want to say,
Yes.
yeah, Darren. Well, first, I want to say, first of all, Darren, thank you so much for your transparency. I want to say, oftentimes, especially as men, as Black men, young men, as we matriculate in age, sometimes the difficulty is transparency. I think that's a very hard thing we do. We actually live in a time, and I want to talk a little bit, maybe a little later, about these two terms, the circle of concern and the circle of influence. Anybody ever heard of that before? Circle of concern, circle of influence. So we look at the circle of influence and concern. So we look at basically those things which are influential around us, right? Stuff that we really don't have control over. We're looking at COVID. We're looking at what recently just took place with the shooting in Illinois, right? We're looking at laws that can change, and I know Mr. Cook will talk a little bit about this too. But we're also looking at concerns, things that we have control over, right? Things that we personally, individually, can make decisions on, whether we allow those things to influence how we impact our lives and how we impact other lives, right? So we're talking about how we internalize our thoughts, how we internalize how we feel to how we think others may feel about us. And so a lot of this stuff, and we don't often talk about it, but it's systemic. For example, classism, right? We don't want to really go into that. I'm sure we will, but we're looking at a variety of different things systemically that impacts Black men in general. And so we grow up in a time where Black men, and I'm not speaking for every young man, but either if you don't have enough wealth or an adequate job or the prettiest woman or the biggest house or the most notoriety or even in a sense people fear you, right? You want folks, when you walk into a room, into a presence, you want that debonair demeanor. You want individuals to look at you and really, if not fear you, but respect your presence. You hear the saying all the time with Black men: "You're not going to disrespect me. You better respect me." Where does that really come from? This ideology of desiring respect, wanting respect, and it all comes from a system that does not really look at Black men they look at Black men in an inhumane and not in a humane way. And so there are other characteristics that I truly believe that we try to personify in some sense, to deem some significance, to deem some essentiality, to deem some level of reverence as Black men, especially in America, where we are treated and we are dehumanized across the board. We talk about cultural appropriation. We look at how people love to take everything from us as Black and brown people in this country, but never celebrate who we are and what we present. And so I believe we, in some sense, have to, if not harness how we feel, we have to project who we are. And sometimes those projections are not in the best positive light. And so it could be our speech, how we talk to each other or talk to others. It could be in our interactions, how we, integrate. It could be, it could be the stuff that we do behaviorally or emotionally to try to create some type of understanding to others, to make individuals feel as if, like I said before, we have arrived, we are here, respect us, acknowledge who we are. And so we talk often about what we can do therapeutically, but I think we have to go back to the basics and really talk about these systems, racism, classism. We have to really go back to understand how we as Black folks have integrated and also in some sense accommodated, but we've never been able to assimilate into these systems. And so these are things that I think we need to really address, and those will be able to really, I believe, highlight why we as Black men and as Black women have to deal with a lot of the emotional and behavioral indifferences in the country that we live in. I always say we are second-class citizens doing first-class work. That's how I feel. That's who we are as a people. So,
yeah, I 100%.
So really understanding how. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
no, I was saying,
Yeah.
Lamar, yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I 100% agree with Duran and Lamar. Childhood trauma has a cataclysmic effect that can last for generations if issues are not addressed. I being in the classroom, I worked in youth development for 10 years. And I've also been a staff pastor at a church as well. And am a minister of the gospel as well. And one thing that I've encountered when engaging with families is that there are giants that our youth are having to face and kill that dad and mom did not, in so many different circles. And these can come in different forms through unhealthy habits, through relationships, through and their cycles. And when it comes to addressing childhood trauma, especially and men, and especially Black men as well, um, a young man grows up looking at relationships with women, uh, whether marriage, how he engages with other men through the lens of what he sees in the adults that are raising him, especially his father and his mother. He looks at it through that lens, and it's difficult. It's hard to be what you don't see, and a lot of the habits, the cycles, aren't. It's not necessarily the child's fault or the fault of the youth, but it's they're living what they've seen. If you take a sponge and you dip it in any liquid substance, when you squeeze it, it's going to what's going to come out of that sponge is what it takes up the form of whatever liquid that you placed it in. And so no matter what that substance is, when the troubles, the trials, the storms, the challenges of life actually end up squeezing a lot of our men. A lot of what's coming out is issues that we don't even know are exist because we haven't taken the time to really stop and really get help. And I generally believe that a lot of men want to be good men, good husbands, good fathers, good significant others, good friends, but it's unpopular to say that we don't know how to do it. It's unpopular to be transparent. It's not popular to say that, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. I'm hurting, which leads to a lot of us dropping a ball in a lot of areas. And for a lot of men, it seems easier to just act like we don't care when really we really do. So I think trauma that's not addressed, it can lead to a lot of different cycles. I was talking with a friend, and even it was mentioned that one reason that Steve Harvey, as we look at Steve Harvey, for example, well, he's cut his head bald now, and but at one point when we saw him, he always had these sharp haircuts all the time. That line was crisp. I mean, completely crisp, and he cares about his image. But some of that also, there were some things in his childhood as well that drove him to say, you know what? I'm really going to care about my image, and I'm really going to take care of my image. And to be transparent for me, I remember being in high school and I would get roasted a lot for sometimes it was my clothes, sometimes it was my haircuts. I used to get roasted a lot in elementary and in high school. And to this day, I never forgot it. And so I made it a point, even as a male, when I graduated, or not even before I graduated, I said, you know what? I'm going to just keep getting these haircuts and keep taking good care of myself. I care about my image. But there are times that, like, I still remember the things that were said. I still remember some of the comments that were made, so I think this is why the therapy and really having brotherhood and community is really important, to be able to unpack with somebody those issues that nobody's asked you questions about. I shared this in the last in part one, but that I met with my therapist for the first time a few weeks ago, and I felt really proud of myself that I actually sat down with my therapist and met with him. And when I started talking with him, I just immediately just started crying. And I had no idea where this heaviness was coming from. But he helped me to see, by asking just a few questions, that I have been running so much, working in the classroom, working in the community, doing mentoring, working with Good Men Do Exist. I've been trying to pour out to so many people that I haven't even had time to sit down and catch up with me. And there's a term he shared with me called compassion fatigue, which I did not even know existed. When you talk about compassion fatigue, you can really in the process of caring for so many people, you can definitely experience that burnout and not know you're experiencing burnout. And as an educator, what burnout can look like, this is one way. My impatience with students who are not catching on or learning certain concepts that I'm teaching them as quickly as I want them to. At one point in the classroom, I had to monitor my reaction, and they have a lot of respect for me. But there were times I got really, really impatient and a little irritated, and I had to sit down. And this is when reality set in. In my classroom, at my desk, I have stress balls. I have 4 of them. And I've taught my children and my students how to process what they're feeling, how to take the moment to cool down. I keep a cool down corner in my classroom. Hey, if you need it, come get the stress ball. I want you to take some deep breaths. I want you to use positive affirmations. Do you know that whenever I would get upset, my students would bring me the stress ball? They were actually giving back to me what I gave to them. So whenever I would get impatient, I would hear, Mr. Tyler, do you need this? Are you okay? And they were genuine. And then they would give me a hug. Are you all right, Mr. Tyler? And then the ego was sometimes, well, of course I'm all right. I'm fine. Leave me alone. But it caused me to take a deep, deep look. Am I really experiencing burnout right now? Am I exhibiting, this frustration out of fatigue? And as a man, what does it look like to be honest about that and be honest about the areas that we need healing? I believe that God can't heal what we don't reveal. And if we're going to get healing, we have to acknowledge that these areas are really, really are problems. For example, why is it just in some homes, Dad, Mom, why is it that I see you in a relationship with a different person every few months? Or why is it that, the stability has been difficult? Why is it that, anytime this particular area is talked about, it triggers anger? And so is it easier for me to bottle it up, or how do I deal with that? So I think those are things we need to explore.
Yeah, I'm going to basically piggyback on what all these other outstanding gentlemen have discussed. We can call it the elephant in the room. We can call it the system. And we definitely, when we have this discussion, aren't really talking about the usual suspects of abuse, neglect, dysfunction, and so forth. This is specific to a systemic issue, and that systemic issue is racism. Structural, institutional, however you want to label it. But it is part of the system we live in. Can you imagine if we didn't have racism? Would we be having this discussion right now? But in all honesty, in all truth, and in reality, racism exists. And when we talk about childhood trauma, we're talking about young children learning that they're inferior, not necessarily through the actions of their parents or friends, because that's more of a subconscious talk, and sometimes conscious talk, actually, but through the world you live in. You learn that pretty much most things are more important than you. And like most of the brothers here said, we are dehumanized over and over and over again. And no matter how strong your brain is like that sponge that, was it Jeffrey or Lamar that talked about you put that sponge in water and it soaks up whatever. No matter how strong you are, the brain is malleable, and the topic that wins is the topic that you're most exposed to, physically and mentally. So the great thing is, if and when that happens, whatever is learned can be unlearned. And we have to have these type of support groups
Mm.
structurally and in the system, that's part of the system, just like gym helps kids not become obese, shop and art, and other types of extracurriculars that aren't, pushing academics all the time, help you relax and take a mental break. We need that embedded in our system, from the teacher to the parent, and they need help too, through media, through religion, through radio, through everything, because on the other side of it, that's where we get the structural racism from. So we have to teach what I call cultural integrity. So despite you seeing all those negative images of you over and over and over again, what we need to do is make an environment where we see imagery and hear stories of who we really are. Oh, yes, you are the fathers and mothers of civilization. Egypt, ancient,
Mm.
what's that ancient before Egypt? Was it Keys? I'll remember it later. But,
Push.
learn that
Push.
you, what's that? So learn, teach your people not that they were slaves, not that there was Jim Crow. That's
Mm.
important, but teach them that they were the mothers and fathers of civilization, and they can do anything because they have. Teach them that um, no matter what obstacles are in your way, it is the other person that actually has the psychiatric problem, not you, because in order to make someone be inferior or feel inferior, you have the issue. So that's all I'll say about that right now as far as time's concerned.
I wanted to coincide with what Dr. Cook talked about. I think representation is so important. You said that. You talked about representation. I think that is so important. To be able to see is to envision and is to believe. There was something that I was reading I want to share with you all, and I kind of wrote it down. It says, we struggle with what we know. What we now know is internalized oppression. We are proud people, and most of us didn't start our beginning being ashamed of who we are. As time progressed, we began to frame this ideology of not being ashamed. Finding our voice, to me, I believe is highly important, because we're able to have platforms like this to be able to talk about areas of systemic oppression, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about levels of representations. To be able to see a beautiful black young man accomplish greatness outside of, and nothing is wrong with that. I love the game. I played the game, basketball. Besides fiddling with the mic, rapping, besides being typecasted in films, whether he's a drug dealer or a drug lord, or or having to be the pimp, to the womanizer. We got to be able to have representations, and we're blessed to be in positions to be able to reflect and show the beauty of blackness. We need to do it to the highest degree. And not only that, but we also need to applaud, encourage, and also promote individuals that do the same. We're going to talk about, I guess, Kevin Samuels in a little bit, but we also got to highlight how we will probably, in some sense, degrade a brother like that, but we'll go pick up the nearest rapper that's degrading all the black women, being as misogynist as possible, saying all of the things that's heinous towards the culture, and we'll play that on repeat. We'll bump that at the club. We'll ride to that in our car, but we're very quick and can be very stereotypical when it comes to someone else. And so we have to be very conscientious across the board how blackness is represented across the board. And we have to do a good job being accountable of each other. We talk about bringing our brothers and sisters keepers. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're trying to be, I would say, too nosy or in folks' business because we are concerned of the matters at hand. No, we have empathy and compassion. No, we're all we have. No, if we take care of each other, our community will continuously to expand and continue to grow and continue to be protected by this village. And I think oftentimes, we're hesitant to do things. And I said this at the last time we had our webcast, because one, if it's not me, it ain't my business. And number two, some of us don't have healthy relationships, not only with others, but even with ourselves. So we don't even know how to approach folks and have honest, sincere, and healthy conversations. And so I think it's very important. I want to get back to, we're going to talk about this a little bit too, the church. I'm a strong believer. I said this before, I'm a Christian. I love the Lord, but the church has to do a better job. Some folks are doing what they can, but we got a lot of our older members, they passing on, they leaving. And they're passing this baton and this torch over to young folks who have not taken the initiative. And I understand how the traditionalism of the church looks. It's too old, it's decrepit, it's not fun, it's not cool, it don't turn up. But we got to do a better job as young folks and young at heart to be able to integrate together and bridge the generational gap within the Black community, so we can be able to have a more holistic, healthy family. And Dr. Cook says something important. Representation is so important. I mean, think about it. We look at films like Good Times, and yeah, we laugh at JJ and Michael, but look at the Black, beautiful, strong father that was in that home, right? We look at Sanford and Son, but we don't really acknowledge how Fred Sanford is teaching Lamont the importance of keeping this business going, right? This junkyard, or this car junkyard that he had, to be able to keep this equity in line, because the more you have wealth, the more you have good credit. The more you have good credit, the more systemically you'll be able to finagle your way through this society that's not built against you. And so there's so many. I'll give you another person. I know we're dealing, this is my last point. I know people can go 50-50 with Bill Cosby. But one of the things that inspired me watching the Cosby Show was the fact that we had a Black doctor, we had a female Black lawyer, we had young people on the show that had difficulties that they were experiencing growing up with relationships and who they liked and who they didn't. I mean, Theo had dyslexia, I believe. He had a disorder. We had other individuals in the family. I think that was for the first time I seen on major TV. Denise went to school, didn't want to even go to college anymore. She dropped out. I mean, it wasn't even cool for her, right? And so the whole ideal of maybe college doesn't work for everybody. Maybe a trade does. Maybe somebody doing something completely different could be beneficial for their career. My point is that representation is important. We see such a beautiful family, but then what we think sometimes, especially to us as Black folks, and I'm not saying everybody, but sometimes that's not even cool. Sometimes it's more cool to do the crime than to be the person to express who did the crime. That's more cooler. And so it's like, in my mind, I feel like the poison has permeated within our community, and it hasn't come from us. But we're okay with making sure that everybody else become poisonous. We have to do a better job with weeding out those problems, calling a spade, standing together, being confident behind what we believe, holding God to our degree and our decree, and also at the end of the day, be mindful that, and I said this before, we all we have. If anything comes in and intrudes within the culture to dilute the culture, we need to remove it. And I believe that's important. And remove it, I'm not speaking in a derogatory sense of doing something harmful. I mean, not allowing it to be a part of a culture which is trying to heal and become better than what we were before. That's what I mean. I got to clear that up because, we in a different time. So.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, each of you touched upon a lot of, different things in regards to how even in childhood we're exposed to how that impact us, especially men, in regards to self-esteem, self-perception, the examples or role models or lack thereof in growing up, and how that can mold and manifest in what they think about themselves, and then how we would outwardly behave, not just men, but anyone in particular. So, understanding how, elements like childhood trauma, self-esteem, self-perception, and how all this can mold into how a man views himself, his level, both the negative and the positive. So looking at this element of toxic masculinity and what it means. I know that's a term that's been kind of thrown out in various areas when it comes to abusive behavior, aggressive behavior, misogyny. There's a lot of different elements of toxic masculinity. So what do you feel, how would you define toxic masculinity, and how does it negatively impact the relational health of men? So what's relational health? How can relate to others, whether it's a spouse, a partner, a friend, um, a parent, whoever, our neighbor, and how does toxic masculinity um, negatively affect that?
I go back. I'm gonna try to address this here. As a kid, my stepfather used to wake me up to a song by Donny Hathaway, "To be young, gifted, and black." To be young, gifted, and black. Old to be young, gifted, and black. And I play it often now because he was instilling in me it was okay to be young, gifted, and black. Lamar said something earlier about the Theo. I'm dyslexic. I'm dyslexic. I was diagnosed in 11th grade. So, and I'm going back into the toxic side of it. The toxic side of it, you have people telling you, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't be that. We have to, as Jeff said, you have to internalize things in your head and say, yes, I can do it. I remember having a second grade teacher telling my mom, and my mom was an educator, that, there's no hope for it. Literally, because I couldn't read. Literally. And it's to the point now, and she's still living, I'm not going to call her name. Every time I go home, I make it a point to go by and see her. I make it a point not only to go by and see her, I'm going to say it, every year she gets a copy of my W-2 form. just for good measure. It's not, and that drove me as a youth to do positive things. Now, at the same time, in my community, I had a gentleman across the street taught me 5th grade science, Horace Lemon. I also had a gentleman down the street, the Reverend John A. Brooks, who was not only a pastor, he was the vice principal in my middle school. So I had other male teachers, and Jeff, thank you for being in the classroom. I had other folks to instill in me to be positive. Now, the toxic masculinity, I don't know where that came from. I don't know how it got into our community, but for whatever it is, I think someone said we need to just get rid of it. I don't even use the word. Here in the Charles County community, everyone knows that I'm running for office, and I've had people of color say, why are you doing this? I've had, you're not the one, and I kind of laugh, and I always say, if not me, who else did? If not me, who else did? Here we had Colonel Wade, who died in office in 2002. The powers to be decided he died in office. They decided not to fill his seat, which I wasn't here. I moved in 2005. But since then, we have not had any representation on the school board from a male perspective since then. And we also talk about having Black men inside the school as teachers. Jeff, I'll let Jeff later answer this, but I will be willing to bet there's not even 3 in his building. And he's probably the only one. But
wow.
So we talk about, being toxic, I like to see, Dr. Cook running around in the community in his shrubs. Easy, I talk to you all the time, I come in your office. I love to see when you come out in your shrubs and let these young folks in your office see what you're doing, you're running your business. And that's how we eradicate that. But we always have to be positive affirmations no matter what. I think, and I'm gonna stop right here. I think that word toxic is the most overused word in our community because everything we say, oh, that's toxic. Well, no, some of that stuff is not toxic. We need to think about, we always want to blame Satan or the devil for everything. But some of that stuff is, guess what, the choices that we made, the stuff that we make. So, and I'm gonna end it right there. I might preach a sermon on that one. Feel my help coming.
Love it. Yeah, D. Yeah, that was good. To answer your question too, you are very correct about the school. We have, including myself, two black male classroom teachers. There's another black male. He's awesome that works in our building as well. But yeah, the representation. It keeps coming back to everything like that you guys have said, Lamar and Dr. Cook. Representation does matter in every aspect. And so thank you, D, for running. Thank you. Because it really does. It affects so much. And it was,
Let me ask you,
yeah.
this, sir. Educators. It's to the point now, black men are discouraged from becoming educators. Now that right now, we talk about toxic. That right there, how are you going to encourage tell someone not to do that? And that's their true passion, what they want to do. If we want to talk about representation, never tell a child or a student, don't do something. If they feel they want to be, I want to fly to the moon one day. Dream it, study on it, and become it. I apologize, Jeff.
No, that was perfect. No, not at all. I'm glad you said that because yeah, there's a definite need. There's a deficit. There's a family deficit, a social deficit, a community. And whenever you have a deficit in the home, you're going to have somewhere you're going to have a deficit in the community. You have a deficit in the community, you're going to have a deficit in the state. You have deficits all over the state, you're going to have deficits in your country. And so it's a ripple effect. Healthy men, healthy women produce healthy families. Healthy families produce healthy citizens. Healthy citizens produce healthy cities, healthy states. Healthy states go on and produce healthy country. And so when you say that, it actually, and you're right, there's so many words. We're quick to label a lot of things. And I agree that toxic is a word. It's been thrown around quite a bit. And a lot of people tend to throw these terms around and have no idea how to define them. They have no idea how to even pinpoint what they mean. And, especially when I wanted to touch on the race as well, because that's been a very key and pivotal area. It is important for our students and for our families, adults, to understand that our history did not begin with us in chains. It did not start with us in chains. And so even in the classroom, just having to identify with the young men and where you come from. Did you study about Timbuktu, about Egypt, about pyramids, about King Mansa Musa, who was so wealthy that he distributed wealth. He distributed wealth in his journey throughout the desert. These are his ancient historical African figures that built legacies that aren't talked about. And so when we talk about even the trauma that we deal with, even the racial trauma and everything that comes with what happens in America, there was a comedian, Michael Shea. He said this, that it's interesting that when you hear the term Black Lives Matter, you hear that people automatically associate it with the movement. Oh, that you're with the movement. When that was a hashtag that was used long before the movement even started. But more than a hashtag, it was a statement. For example, if your D or Dr. Cook, if your houses were on fire and I was a firefighter, and I went into your neighborhood to put your fire out, it would look kind of crazy for me to start hosing the other houses when they're not on fire. To say, hey, these other houses matter to this, we need to make sure they're safe. But right now, our house has been on fire for years. And so this is why we specifically target and point out and speak out on these areas, because if we have a saying in my school, if our Black men are in trouble, we're in trouble. We're all in trouble. If our men are in trouble, we are all in trouble. And so, having that awareness, and we use that term with toxic masculinity a lot, and with toxicity. Well, what does that look like? Honestly, I don't even know how to fully define it. what does toxic masculinity look like? We can ascribe, some terms or statements, but at the end of the day, when I think of toxic, me personally, I think of anything that's not only self-destructive, but it's also destructive to others, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually. That's how, when I hear toxic, that's what I think of. So I think that causes us to ask a question: what am I doing as a man and as a person that can be destructive in my relationships and to other people? What habits have I learned or picked up that can be destructive? And how do I go about addressing that?
I guess I'll take the mic next. And first, I just wanted to mention that the place I was thinking about before Egypt was ancient Kemet. If you don't and haven't read about ancient Kemet, please do. Second, since Mr. Tross is plugging some candidacy, I wanted to let everyone know I'm running for District 1 County Commissioner in Charles County. So please vote for Richard Cook. Early voting starts the 7th through the 14th. Primaries July 19th. Thank you. So I love how these brilliant men here have taken that question, taken that definition, and turned it into something positive. And I think I'm going to do the same thing. We've all heard the term history and his story, and this is about his definition. You know, it reminds me when we talk about toxic masculinity, the term super predator or any of those negative stereotypes or um, denotations. And I think this is just one more to add to the list that helps dehumanize a person. We rarely hear that when we talk about young white men. It's usually coupled with us, and again, it helps to dehumanize us. Jeffrey and all teachers are taught that the child's brain is different. It's different than the adult brain. It's not formed, just like the bodies aren't adult formed yet. And in our frontal lobes and other parts of our brains, we lack certain types of inhibitors that help us inhibit certain behavior. And that is very, very well known. It's so well known that, as we all know, with the disparities in the prison to pipeline statistics with people of color and versus other people, that you look at a way we've handled the crack epidemic to the way we've handled the opioid epidemic. Not really much difference in behaviors there or drug use there. It's that one party has been systemically, again, there's that word, dehumanized, treated different, and words like this help to do that. So there's no truth, justice, or equality in that whatsoever. And so when we talk about that word, we have to do what we're doing right now and turn it around. Teach youngsters about their mental health like we teach them about the food pyramid or not eating processed foods and exercise and things like that. And it's up to us to do it because we don't have ownership of the media and all the other avenues that push the narrative and dehumanize us. So again, Shinieri, thank you for holding forums like this to help humanize us and let the world see that they can be what they see on YouTube and television. And we are here for you, and we will reach out to you, and we will nurture you because what's that old saying? It takes a village.
Absolutely. Oh, can you unmute, Lamar? I think you're still muted.
Still muted.
Oh. Lamar, try to unmute again. Oh, okay. Looks like we still can't hear you, Lamar. Let's try to. Okay, so you can hear us, but it looks like we can't hear you. Can you?
Okay, I'm good. You hear me? I'm
There we
alive. I'm
go.
here. I'm breathing.
Okay.
I wanted to say,
Yes.
really briefly, I wanted to say that you all have gotten beside yourselves. And when I say that, I want us to always keep in mind from the beginning that we were never brought here to be in the positions that we are in today. And so we have gotten besides ourselves. We're running for office. We've gotten educated. We've owned businesses and practices with teachers. We have influence as people that are Black in this country. And the initial aspect of us coming to this country in the first place was just product. And it was to do exactly what we were destined to do from the beginning, in which they thought, our white male counterparts, was to have us here to continue to build and strengthen the borders for them. And I say jokingly, but in all sincerity, we've gotten beside ourselves. And so now we're asking for racial equality when initially from the beginning we was not even considered to be, what, 3/5. And so it's like we have to get back to the basics and understand this system. And now what we're doing, we're asking a system that did not allow us to be even thought of within the system of design to make some changes for Black people. And so what I think, for me personally, we should be focusing on, things that we can do. And I talked about this the first webcast that I had with Shanari. I'm real big on reconstruction. I'm real big on what reconstruction looks like. And oftentimes a lot of folks are scared to talk about that. But I believe that we have to reconstruct, reinstitute, reestablish a different system. And this system that we reconstruct, reinstitute, or reestablish will allow everyone to be able to sit at the table, especially those who are Black and brown in this country, and to have the levels of equality that our white males and females also have. These are things that we don't talk about. And another thing, there's a really good book that came out, was called The Death of the Civil Rights Movement and the Reign of Hip Hop by Todd Boyd. And we don't talk often about how powerful hip hop music is amongst our peers, even amongst our young people. We got to look at how these systems are configured and integrated within our culture. And although we're having one voice that says one thing, that voice is being trumped by a whole bunch of other voices. We have to be mindful that we may have a few banks, but we don't control the common system. We don't control the media. These are things that we have to fight against, which are hegemonies. And we have to think, well, you and I, all of us coming together and having this podcast or having this conversation webcast, that's great. But the question is, how do we get this to a larger audience? How do we be able to push back the algorithms that knocks us away when we're starting to speak truth and not get it to the masses that really needs to hear that? We got Elon Musk that just took over Twitter. What is that going to look like in a couple of months, right? What is Meta World going to look like when we move away from this ideology of humanistic and we move into a meta space with avatars, and now we can really target our young people and really attack the minds of what they're thinking and how they're feeling and how they perceive themselves. We're looking at all of these different places that have power and infrastructure. And the question is, where are we? Where do we sit at that table? Where do people of color, especially Black folks, where do we sit at that table? And then when we have enough power to sit at that table, what are we doing to change the trajectory of how people see Black people? And we're blessed to be directors, own major businesses, run for offices, win, be ministers and be in front of pulpits, be journalists and news media experts. When we have this influence, what are we doing to shift, the narrative of how Black folks are seen, how Black folks are viewed? and not be afraid of the consequences that may come with losing a job, being blackballed, right? These are the things that we're terrified of, afraid of what our counterparts are going to give us or what they can take away. And so I believe that when we get in these positions of power, we have to do a better job to not assimilate and not accommodate, but do what we can to stand tall, stand strong, and to be the voice so young folks that can hear us and see us can be able to follow that staff like Moses did in the wilderness. That to me is very imperative. And I feel like we have a lot of folks that's out there doing the great work, but we have a lot of voices that's drowning out that work because of the systems that put in place to allow that to take place.
Wow, these are all excellent points. You guys hit it on the head. Again, getting away from what negative stereotypes and images are, projected onto Black men and changing the narrative. So really understand is manhood. What does it mean to be a man? Another term that's often kind of kicked this idea of the alpha male, and what are the attributes that this now from what the toxic male now to the alpha male, which is the type of man to be venerated, to be adored, to be emulated, right? So what is this idea of an alpha male? And why are these certain traits so idealized in our society? Now, I mentioned earlier about, I wanted to kind of bring up some somewhat controversial figures and issues regarding manhood and masculinity. Thing that has been kind of circulating the internet is this idea of what is defined as a quote unquote high value man. And this is a term that's existed for some time. It was popularized by recently deceased podcaster, Mr. Kevin Samuels. And he defined a high value kind of goes in line with what we would understand as to be an alpha male. He defined it as this: a man that has an income of $10,000 or more a month, a man that is in network with other high value men, a man that is highly respected by his peers. Number four, a man that contributes meaningfully in society, a leader and a standard bearer. And number five, a man that is highly desired by women. So this is what he has defined as a high value man, someone that actually exhibits all of these attributes. And one thing that really stuck out to me is one was the economic part of it, how much he makes. And the other was how much power, influence, and how much respect he gets from his peers. So what are your thoughts? And I'm really curious about this one, this idea of what a high value man is, what an alpha is, and what you feel should be the real characteristics of a high value man. Anyone want to take that?
I'm gonna say this, and I'm only gonna speak for me. I can't speak for all these great kings that's on here on this panel. I think I talked earlier about the difference between the circle of influence and the circle of concern, and I'm glad we mentioned that and we elaborated on that a little bit. I shared that, and I think a lot of the things that Mr. Samuels, he's gone, and I'm not going to talk ill of a person that has passed on, as I wouldn't want to talk about anyone ill that has passed on. But what I would say concerning me, when I deal with me, I'm more concerned of the ideal of what God desires in a man. And I'm going to speak on that. We have a lot of influences and a lot of things that we look at that will allow us to decide if we are what we are or what we're not. And I shared this the last webcast that I believe is the battle of the mind. I believe we're in a position today where there are a lot of areas that makes us feel inadequate, and those things are not even reality. You go on social media, you can scroll through, look at people's lives, and those things are filtered. My man left. I don't know if Jeff left. I don't know what happened. Uh, those things are filtered. Those things are not even real. And we look at other people's lives. We hear other people make comments and suggestions and thought of what they think a real man represents. And in actuality, that's not even a real man. And so for me, I would say a real man is one that honors God, that fears God, that does all that he can to make sure that his situation with whoever he loves and values is according to the will of God. And so if a person is not in line by those things, to me, I don't think they truly reflect a real man. Um, we got enough in this world to try to deal with and battle through to identify what a man is. Is it the car I have? Is the provisions that I provide? Is it how many babies I placed on this earth? Is it how much money I have? Is it how well I look? Or is it truly internally what I do, what I believe of myself, what I conceive, and how what I do receive and feel, how I treat others? I think a real man is real intro and retrospect in how we treat others, how we internalize how we feel, and how we treat others. I don't agree with half of the stuff that Kevin Samuel said, but we do have to holistically look at a man that talked and shared thoughts of his feelings. These are his interactions. This is what he projected on the world by what he thought. He didn't generalize a statement towards men. These are his feelings. And we also got to address some of the women that came on and had some ideas of wanting to know. They were inquiring what were the desires that certain men had to fit their particular, agenda or criteria. And so I believe that all of us are hurting, man. Hurt people hurt people. A lot of us are trying to figure out the meaning of life. We're in deep places, dark places, sunken places. And I keep going back to the person who was the design order, which is God. I believe he left us a design pattern, how we need to maneuver, how we need to treat each other, how we need to love on each other and love each other. And we have to be very mindful of not to be so caught up on a man who is merely a human being, who is an error every day to define what we think the meaning of life is. It's impossible. So that's my take on that. I don't know how the brothers feel.
I think Jeff. Lamar had some great things he said about Mr. Samuels. This is a tough one. Just like anything else, you take what you need, and the rest of the stuff you throw it out. What Kevin said was some demeaning things. I don't agree with some of the things he said. I'm not even going to get into what I disagree with. I don't agree with. As far as the high value, high dollar man, first of all, I'm a child of the King. I'm a child of the highmost, so I'm a valued man. I'm gainfully employed. I'm a highly valued man, period, the end. My income is no one else's business. I can tell you this here, I'm not doing bad. And that's only by the grace of God. Lamar, there's only one exception I disagree with, and that's like that word toxic. And folks who know me, that word real man, I think that's a word that has been put into the urban community to just basically devalue men. When I look at a real man, I look at my father, who at the time left high school, dropped out to go and serve in the army in the Korean conflict, who came back to finish his high school education and then go off to college and then graduate. So when I say that real man, just me, it doesn't define one. A real man could be someone that's on the trash truck in the morning, that's taking care of his family, doing what he has to do. I think when we think of a real man, that concept, the last real man to walk this earth was Jesus Christ, who's my Savior, who on the third day got up with all power in his hand. They went back and rolled the stone away. And as we know, when they rolled the stone away, the men wasn't even there. They punked out and left. The women were there. So when we talk about a real man, why did they run when the stone was rolled away? And I'm not trying to, I just don't like the term real man. But as again, back to Samuels, what he said about the high value men, I think that's trash. Everyone on this call are high valued men. Every man that a man who I meet in the grocery store, whether it be at the food line up the street, working, stocking shelves, he's a high valued man, period. The end. That's just my take on it.
Yes, great feedback. Great feedback. You know, when I think of the terms that we've been hearing from this gentleman who I've never uh, watched before, but I get the gist of what we're talking about. I think about the last 2.5 years of this COVID pandemic in the terms mis and disinformation. And that type of showmanship works very well on people who might not feel very confident about themselves, might not have a lot of, intestinal fortitude, as my coach used to say. And that showmanship is for a reason. He's trying to make money, and he needs high ratings. And in order to get high ratings, you usually have high drama. And the same thing happened with COVID and the information that was given out to people as well. And unless you have a good foundation, and the foundation for COVID may be, educational level. It might be that you didn't have an education, but you know how to read and critical think. It might be that you looked at the stats in the hospitals and the doctor's offices and actually believed in reality instead of, fake news, as it's called. And the same thing applies to this type of information someone receives, whether it's you're in an area where you see an abusive man and you think that's how a man should be, or a man who does drugs and you think that's how a man should be, or any other negative act or lifestyle that you see happening that you think is the ideal man. Unless you have some type of strong foundation, and religion has come up a lot here, but other things like a family figure, a friendly figure, a pastor, a dad, a cousin, a mom, a friend, a classmate who can help you like communities do, not smoke or not drink or whatever it is. That's just another aspect of life that, unless you have a strong base and a strong foundation, which you should be learning at a very young age and should be community driven, you're going to fall prey to that. So that's all I got to say about that one.
Dr. Cook, you saved yourself from not listening to it. I didn't know who he was until because of COVID. I think his ratings went up because people had the opportunity to sit at the computer and just listen to that joker. That's just my honest opinion. And the last thing is, every woman, young lady that he insulted or whatever, demeaned, they called into that show to get what he was dishing. So that right there was telling me you were seeking.
I wanted to respond back to Darren with something you said earlier.
Let me finish. I think everyone that called into his show, they did that. No one twist their arm. I don't know if they got paid, but they signed up to be demeaned in public. And that right there is telling you have someone that's trying to demean you, and then you have someone that's low self-esteem for calling into it. Because if you listen to one show or two shows, you knew what you were going to get. I apologize, Lamar.
I just want to, in all fairness, I just really believe that just two things, and I'm gonna let Jeff. I know Jeff has something to say. Just two things. We have to be fair across the board, and I want to say, in all fairness, is that we can reprimand or at times acknowledge some of the things that this gentleman said that was not appropriate towards women. But we have to be very fair that if we don't support someone like this, we have to also have this mindset across the board when anything like this hits the floor that in some sense degrades culture. And we're talking about our music. We're talking about people that you support, as far as putting them in office. We're talking about individuals that you watch on television with your reality TV shows, and you watch them far as your movies that you watch. We're talking about places that you go that are not doing the best to celebrate, to encourage, or also to empower the culture. And so the way I look at this is holistically across the board, that we as a people have to do better, to know to do better, and not even scripture said it's sin. We have to be in a best position to be able to be accountable across the board, one to another. I give you a primary example. We've seen when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. We don't know. We talked about this the last webcast, but we've seen Denzel Washington and we've seen Tyler Perry go over to Will Smith and have a conversation about what took place. We don't know what was said. It calmed him down, but it looked like there was something that was encouraged to allow that brother to know he was out of place. It's the same thing. Where was the brothers at when Kevin Samuels was getting out of line? When Kevin Samuels was getting out of line, and we looked at things in accountability, and we looked at things to be empowering and to protect our women and to be there to support. Was there any brothers making calls? Was there any brothers pulling his coattails? Were we just as entertained and we fanned the flames just for media, just for entertainment? Did we share those videos? Did we say, look what that brother just said? Where were we to be accountable for each other? And I'm just saying, across the board, we have to be fair moving forward, especially doing webcasts like.
Oh, I think you froze.
Did he freeze?
Lamar, it looks like you froze there.
Okay. Well,
All
until
right. So
he
I'm gonna
oh,
try to
yeah.
get him back on. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. He was on a roll. But yeah, can you
Yeah, it
all
was just stopped right there. But you can go ahead, Jeff. We'll get him back on.
no problem. No, a lot of great points were brought up. Me personally, even D, in relation to what you were saying too about the definitions. Um, I personally, with manhood, I think that being a healthy man, this is me personally, I believe that being a healthy man is less about necessarily being a breadwinner, as old term is being a breadwinner, and more about using your unique God-given gifts in order to lead and bless your family. In order to lead and bless your family and to lead and make an impact in the community. And I think we have to look at where we're getting our definitions of manhood to, where we're getting all these definitions from, because, especially hip hop culture, as Lamar mentioned, reality TV. I think one of the most important things we can really share with our youth is that these folks that we see on TV in entertainment, a lot of them are paid actors. They are paid actors. They are paid entertainers, and they're paid to project a certain image and to be a certain way. Um, and they actually get checks for it. I think um, we've taught a lot of our young men different values, different things. We haven't taught our men how to win wars in the unseen arenas of their lives. We're gaining money, gaining influence, getting social media likes, getting followers, but so many people are losing their souls in the process. And so I think when we look at, and me too, I didn't never watch Kevin Samuels. I never listened to him either. What I know about him has come from what other people have said about him, and even some short clips that I've seen. But when I even heard the term the high value man, my first question was, okay, high value according to who? Value by whom, though?
Mm.
Value by you, or value by what other people perceive as a man? And I think we need to really be careful where we get our definition from. There's a culture's definition. There's our personal definition, and then there's God's definition. And
Man.
whichever one we buy into and believe impacts how we're going to live as men, whether we live as a boy or whether we live as a man. Because there are a lot of us who are 30, 40, 50 years old, but still exhibiting adolescent tendencies because of where we've gotten our definition. So you have culture's definition of manhood, our personal definition, then there's God's definition, God's definition of manhood. And so what the question is, and then even according to our family upbringing, how we've been raised, we filter our definitions through family, through how we've been raised as well, and the examples that we've seen in our family. And so for my father, hardworking man, and ever since I was a child, and even to this day, he's not extremely wealthy, he's not rich, but our family was always provided for, always taken care of. He got up at 5 a.m. every morning. He still does to this day, and he's in his 60s. He would work and work and work. He would come home, but he also invested time in me. Even if my dad never told me that he loved me, I always knew it. And I still know it because of his actions. And I'm not saying that us telling our sons and daughters, I love you, is not important. It's very important to hear that. And he did. But he's a man of action. And I just think we really have to look at how we're defining manhood, through what lens, through according to who, where we're ascribing that. And the second question is, according to our personal definitions of manhood, what kind of fruit is it producing? How's that going for us? If whatever you, however you, if you don't know your identity, someone will identify you. Someone is going to identify us if we don't know our identity. And whatever you ascribe to define your manhood, that's what you're going to chase after. If it's more money, okay, I don't have enough money, I got to get more cars, I gotta be wealthy, I have to do this. And not saying that finances and saving are not important. They are important, to use wisdom. But what happens when we become so obsessed by it that the definition that this definition is ascribed to manhood, and then whatever the voice that you believe determines the future that you will experience. The voice that you believe determines the future that you will experience. And a lot of the behaviors that we're exhibiting, whether it's toxic masculinity, it comes from men who have twisted the definition of what manhood really is. And so, I believe that a trait of manhood is taking responsibility. First, we have to learn how to be responsible. What does responsibility look like in terms of relationships, in terms of, managing a home, in terms of, being responsible for what you have, in terms of how we respect and treat other people. So.
Man, Jeff, I wanted to, man, I'm over here shaking, bro. I mean, with excitement, because you said exactly what I was saying earlier. That when I mentioned about Kevin Samuels, I said at in the end of the day, there's a standard that God has for a man. It's like, this is Kevin Samuels' ideas. This is what he thinks. But I also want to say this, and this is very important too. What we have to be mindful of is that these standards that were set were standards that we seen and we witnessed, and we eventually allow and internalize. We were brought here, we were enslaved people, and there were systems that were placed on us, and we've taken those same systems and we have used those same systems on our own. And so Dr. Cook said something earlier about the recondition of the mind. You said someone that can learn, can be unlearned, and can be learned again. And so we got to be able to have, that's why representation is so key, because we need to be able to see what a real man looks like in the home. When we say a real man, we're talking about taking care of responsibilities, being accountable, being God-fearing, loving his wife, being honorable, respecting his children as his children respect him, giving back to society, being involved in the community, allowing himself to not only set examples, but being selfless and giving himself to others as well, mentoring, and providing that type of nourishment and nurturing to someone else, these are standards that I truly believe that men, especially black men, need to exemplify. And we need to see these things. And to be frank with you, in our community, they're not cool. Those things are not cool. They don't sell records. Those people don't want to go and watch movies where a man is being honorable and faithful to his wife. We pay to see the adultery. To be honest, we're consuming popularity and propaganda. We're pushing these things out. Media push this out. They see what we like based upon what we continue to stream and look at. They see we want to see the sex and the drugs and the killing and the murdering. We don't support the healthy stuff. We don't even eat healthy. That's a whole new different discussion. We know some of that stuff is a lot expensive. Some of us may not be afforded. But my point is, we're so used to the mundane things, and anything that's brought to our attention to make us shift and change, we have to have a strong desire and a strong pull to transform. And that's why these discussions is important. But we also got to get out here in these streets, and we gotta make it become reality to the folks. We can talk all day, but until they see it and they feel it and understand where we're coming from, some folks are not going to change. They're not going to shift.
Lamar, the words that comes to mind is capitalism.
All day, every day.
Leadership there in the
All day,
U.S.
every
government
day.
is in bed with capitalists. And with
This is big
capitalism.
business.
It's big business. People are getting paid off of our pain.
Yeah, on another note, here's some positive information. I'm sure all of you are aware about this information I'm getting ready to say. It's been studied multiple times that the black male father spends way more time with their children than their white counterparts. Now, that's just truth. We live in Charles County, who is now the wealthiest minority majority place in the country and maybe even the planet. This is making history. We are going to be remembered for how we handle this. And I think with this forum, we are doing a damn good job. Now, what we have to do is make sure we lead and we show with representation. We do the media coverage. We put out the narrative. We make sure that we are in control. So we have a very unique opportunity in this small niche of humankind to do just that. So let's take it from here, and I think all of us that are here do action. But let's take it to the next level and get everyone else involved, because I say it again, and I'm sure you all agree, it takes a village. Government is not going to do it. The man ain't going to do it. We have to do it. So let's do it. And let's get everyone up to do it with us, just like we did with the civil rights movement and how everyone got involved with that. It wasn't the government that is changed. It's us that changed the government.
Absolutely. And really looking at this from a solutions-oriented standpoint. What are the things we know about these issues within our community? We know about these problems and issues amongst Black men, and how the society that we're put in has a lot to do with, the adversities and the issues that are going on. So now let's look towards what are the solutions? What are the things? I know all of you had mentioned in some level or degree about the importance of spirituality and your faith and how that has impacted, how you have behaved and the things that you've accomplished, and the way you view yourself and other men in your life. So what do you feel that the role of spirituality and faith has in really addressing a lot of these issues that we've talked tonight regarding men, both from the emotional, from the regional and the social standpoint?
My faith is unmovable. My faith is my faith. I was born and raised by faith. And I'm going to tell you about my faith. Just so happened you brought that up. I'm sitting here at my desk, my work desk, my computer, got a printer there. I have my Bible that's opened up. I start off the morning, I get up in the morning, I shower, shave, and my work desk is over here. But before I turn that power on. I take a minute, read scripture, and I pray, and I ask God to lead me throughout the day. It's every morning. But faith is it's not seen. It's an action. You have to walk in your faith, not be scared to talk about your faith. And I'm not talking about beat folks over the head with it, but your faith, when people see you when you walk, when they see you, they know that you're a man of faith. Your actions should show that you're a man of faith. If we talk about faith, everywhere I go, whether it be in the grocery store, whether I see a young man stocking the shelves or whatever, I always say, how are you doing? Look them in their eyes and try to talk something positive into their lives. I met a young man today. Long story short, I fell off a motorcycle years ago. I got broke both metacarpal bones. So sometimes my thumbs do what they want to do. I got pins in both hands. So as I was getting I'd cut some watermelon up in a bowl. I dropped the whole bowl out of the refrigerator. So I cleaned it up. So as I was just mad with myself because I really wanted some of that, went to Food Line to get me another one. The young man was in the produce and he had some earbuds in. And I said, I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, what are you listening to? He said, man, I'm listening to some good old gospel music. I looked at him and said, what you listen to? He said, you don't know anything about this. I said, what do you listen to? And he let me have one, and I didn't put it all in my ear. And the young man was listening to some James Cleveland. And I looked at him, I was like, whoa, what do you know about James Cleveland? Clearly he's in his 20s. And he said, oh, my grandfather. And I said, man, we sit there and talk for 20 minutes. He was talking about his grandfather, telling about my grandfather. We used to ride and have the 8-track. That 8-track used to be, the 8-track, it stayed right there. And we sit there and talked about a whole lot of songs of James Cleveland, just talking about it. And I found out to him that he wants to become a minister. He was saying, well, I think I've been called. I said, well, that's between you and your God. I said, but what I can encourage you is to make sure that you go to school and learn how to do that. He looked at me and said, what do you mean? Seminary, college, you have to study. I say, young man, you should be out here practicing on someone else's faith. Go study, learn to do the job, and be the best that you can be. But again, my faith, I always tell folks, I had that Creflo Dollar thing this weekend about tithing. I said, I'm tithing. It works for me. It has always worked for me. So I'm going to continue to tithe. So I don't let anybody else, I got friends who are Muslim, Buddhist, or whatever. Let them do what they want to do, and I respect them. But my faith is in Jesus Christ, who sustains me. Is the doors of the church open yet?
Yeah. You done had some one-liners tonight, boy.
Hey,
some one-liners tonight.
Hey, Jeff, is there one?
Oh no!
And let the church say,
is there one? That's good. Oh man, no, it's
by letter, baptism, or what?
Wait, say that again.
Can you come to the church by letter? By baptism? Hey. Christian experience is the other.
Oh my God, I'm loving this. This is funny. Guys, if you don't mind, I wanted to share some of the comments here. There's some people commenting. Jane Roslyn Williams, thank you so much for joining us. She said, Lamar, I love what you said about having a place at the table. We have to desire or demand a place at the table so that we can influence decision making. And if we don't, we will find ourselves just on the menu. I think that goes back to Dr. Cook and Lamar, which you guys were saying about we push the narrative. We, have the control. We can, communicate and share our story. Another comment, Felicia Robinson said, Black men are resilient. Thank you for this discussion. Let's keep going. Excellent discussion from Ife. Ife said, excellent discussion. Felicia Robinson, representation is important in understanding who we are. So, and people are sharing over here and we're getting good feedback. But
Great comment. Thank
yeah.
you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I agree with all of that. In fact, just like you, D, I have my Bible right here too. It's the Tony Evans Study Bible, one of my favorites. And as far as a resource that I love, I have several books on manhood, but this by far is one of my favorites. It's called Manhood Restored: How the Gospel Makes Men Whole, by Dr. Eric Mason. He's also the same guy that wrote this book too, Woke Church. An urgent call for Christians in America to confront racism and injustice.
I have that book, Jeff.
You have that? Oh, you have that one? Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, I mean, we all have a role to play. We have a work to do. I think the word woke has come up a few times, but I think also part of being woke, especially for us, is not just being aware of your history, of the current issues, the past issues from the past that are still issues, but it's also being woke to me is doing the personal work to put yourself in a position to facilitate change, not just be aware of what needs to change.
In 2020, the pandemic, which is still here, folks are calling this the post-pandemic, but we're still in the pandemic. I'm a strong believer of corporate worship, meeting in the building, fellowshipping with your brothers and sisters in Christ. But I remember I came across this sermon entitled "The Church Has Left the Building." And I say that to say, my clothing line is entitled Kingdom Business Clothing. I said this before, Grandma always say a sermon is better seen, not heard. And I truly believe that we as a people of God have to exemplify more of the light to permeate darkness. I think a lot of us are doing too much of blending in than standing out. I'm going to say that again. A lot of us are blending in and we're not standing out. And I believe that we are the true torchbearers for folks to identify who God is. And if we're not exemplifying what ambassadorship should look like, then how is the world going to know what to do? And who is the world going to turn to when folks that should be leading at the front of the line is blending into the back, and some of us are dwindling outside and we're disappearing from the movement itself? And so when I think about my spirituality, when I think about my walk, even if no one is with me, I know he's still with me. And so I'm not worried at all in any shape or form who will not be next to me or beside me. I know that if he's with me, then I got all that I need. And I think this needs to be instilled in so many of our young folks. Our young folks are not soulless human beings. They have a soul. They manifest a soul. They can have a spirit. And this is important. And that transcends all color barriers. And so when I talk to folks all throughout the community, I talk to individuals, and Shaneri knows this, I could talk to just a random person in the streets and just have conversation. And what I've learned is that folks want you to have a soul-to-soul conversation. Folks, we all dealing with travesty. We're all dealing with, adversity. We're hurting. We're trying to figure out what's the purpose life that we have. And every now and then, we need to have conversations about Christ. We need to have conversations about God. As much as we talk about Will Smith being slapped, as much as we give rhetoric and promotions to Kevin Samuels, as much as we talk about Cardi B's new album and what Megan Thee Stallion is about to do and what City Girls did on the BET Awards with Diddy, as much as we advertise and promote all this other stuff, we should do the same thing in concerns to the God that we serve. And I'm not trying to preach, but I feel like we as a people are becoming distracted. We are becoming discouraged, and we're detouring because we're missing out on what the main purpose of why we are here in the first place. We all have a divine assignment, and pretty soon that divine assignment, we're going to have our name called. All of us going to have the last amen, and we talking about church. And so in the time, in between time, in the meantime, between time, the question is, what are we doing with the time that we have? The folks that we love and we value, our family, our friends, even our enemies, what are we doing to change and help change the trajectory of their lives. And so this webcast, I think, is an amazing start. But soon as we close our laptops, we got work to do. The text message you send a passage, send a devotion, send something loving. Even that person you ain't talked to in 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, that person that you still got problems with from 1972 or 85 or 92 that still owe you some money, whoever that person is, you need to reach out to that person and tell them, man, that's nothing. I love you. Let's get to work. We have to do the change. We can't worry about the world changing. If we change, we can be more effective to changing the world.
Yeah. Lamar, I wanted that was spot on. I wanted to share this statement by Pastor David Platt. He said, he's a pastor of McLean Bible Church. He said, I could not help but think that somewhere along the way, we had missed what is radical about our faith and replaced it with what is comfortable. We are settling for a Christianity that revolves around ourselves when the central message of Christianity is about abandoning ourselves. And so for me, faith, I grew up with in a Christian home. I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior when I was 7 years old. My parents raised me in the faith. My mom and I got baptized together and grew in our faith together. I preached my first sermon when I was 13 to a congregation of people that were in their 50s and 60s. And I will never forget at that moment is when I truly first saw the power of God really just flow. And the purpose was just confirmed. And so I say that because, how I was raised in the faith affects everything now. I mean, everything I do, I try my best to filter it through the voice of God. Even when it comes to leading my household, when it comes to my marriage with my wife, my wife and I met each other in the church. We grew in love. And then she says it to this day, the number one thing that attracted her, that drew her to me was not, the churchiness. It was not what I said. It was my relationship with God. She watched me for a while. And we were friends for a couple of years before we really began dating. And we had community around us. And so faith is
that's a high value man.
I receive it. Oh my gosh. It governs how I do everything. This house is founded on God's voice, on purpose, on divine purpose. On how God is leading and drawing us. And so I found that I know everybody that's listening to this, everybody may believe differently, but when you are not feeding on the word of God, something inside of you will always be starving. And the problem is the things that we've been trying to feed ourselves with, society has seen that it is not working. It's not working. If it were working, we would not be turning to every single thing we can to get fulfillment. Relationships, whether it's drugs, whether it's having all these sexual partners, whether it's trying to fill all of these voids. We're trying to fill God-sized voids with human-sized substitutes.
We said this last webcast. I think I mentioned that all consumption is not good consumption. We have to be in the best position to block. There's a lot of stuff that we're feeding. What is it? See no evil, hear no evil. Like, we got to get into a better position. And I think we have to be mindful of a people of color, especially Black folks. We've been fed evil, period. We were told when we were brought here that we were not of God at all, period. We were told that we were soulless human beings. And so we really got to get back to the basics. And that goes back to what everyone is saying on this panel, that we have to understand what the design order was from the beginning. We all have a divine purpose. We're placed here with a bigger purpose than ourselves. And we can't be the best version of ourselves until we be the best version of what God desires for us to be. And we said this last week, the best version changes with every circumstance. And every situation, you can change how you feel and what you think and what you want to do and who you are. But we have to be able to go back to a baseline. And I think that's what we as a people, especially Black folks, we got to get back to our baseline. When we realize who we are, we can remove this internal oppression that we have and feel proud again. We are beautiful, black, strong, proud people who can have and can do all things, especially through God, if we come together and if we work together collectively. Divided apart, we can't do well. But when we come together, man, we're powerful. We're
Wow,
powerful.
this has been powerful, man. Whew.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and
Yeah.
1 Kings chapter 2, verse 2, verse 1 through 2. When David's time to die drew near, he commanded Solomon his son, saying, I am about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong and show yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways, keeping his statutes. Be strong, show yourself a man. And since we're talking about faith, when it comes down to family, there is a Jesus in our head and there's a Jesus of the Bible. These are two totally different ones. And unpacking that and understanding is very critical to how we live and what we say. There's a God in our head and there's a God in the Bible. And so those definitions, those views don't align a lot of times. And so this is why, and in every man, every person, best analogy I heard this weekend, you have, when you look at heroes, it was a Marvel Men series. You had Peter Parker, you had Spider-Man. Everybody loved, well, not everybody, but people loved a lot of people loved Spider-Man because of what he could do, because of how he could perform. But it was Aunt May and Mary Jane that loved Peter Parker. And see, there are a lot of people inside of every human, inside of every one of us here, there's a human and there's a hero. And so when there's a human and a hero, we attach that to the performance. There are times that we're going to have good days and that we're not going to have not so good days. The world expects us to perform. The world worships performance. They love performance. They love to see the delivery. They love to see the results. They love to see the money. They love to see the success. They love to see all the outward results of a hero. But when it comes to faith, there's a God who sees both and loves the us that other people don't accept.
Jeff, what was the name of Spider-Man's parents? His guardian.
His guardian was Aunt May.
Aunt May?
Aunt May loved
So all
Peter
of us got
Parker.
to ask ourselves this question. You just said people love Peter Parker, but they love Spider-Man, but Peter Parker was more content with Aunt May's and his love with her. We got to ask ourselves that question. What are we more content with? And I think that's the question.
Yeah. What are we more
as a
content
people?
because
We as a people, because we're flooded by this particular agenda that's put on us, we're not content. We're not content, and we feel as if we're missing something, or we're not what we feel inadequate because of the bar that is being placed before us. It's really the carrot tied on a stick in front of the mule. Every time that mule moves, what happens with that carrot? The carrot moves too. And so it's something that in our minds we think we can attain, but in actuality we'll never attain it. And so we need to get to a place of contentment. I didn't say complacency. That's two different terms. But we do need to get to a place of contentment, being okay to say, listen, I'm happy, I'm thankful, I'm blessed. And let me be able to pass these things on to that next individual so they can be happy and thankful and blessed. I think that's one of our main concerns, especially the people, Black folks, that we have to be content with what we are and whose we are, and not worry about what these other agendas is putting in front of us, because it's not attainable by their standards. It's not attainable. And what you're going to end up doing if you don't be careful, you're going to end up selling your soul for riches. And that's what we have. We have a lot of soulless folks walking around that's empty because they have lost their soul trying to attain what they can never attain. And we never talk about that. We never talk about that.
Absolutely. These are really good points. Dr. Cook, did you have any comments on the impact of faith and men and how they operate in this world?
Absolutely. I think these gentlemen have said it all, and I can just say ditto to that. I'm glad that you put it in terms of spirituality and religion, and there are many others, and this is this kind of goes back to what I said. You have to have some type of base. All my patients that I see, mental or physical, are going to have different bases. And I tell my patients specifically about diet: do what works for you. Even if it's like the Atkins diet, if it makes you lose 100 pounds, do it. We'll transition you to something more healthier later. But you got to have some type of base, and that base has to be made of love, divine love. And if you have that behind you, whether it's Christianity or Islam or Buddhism, or the 100 aspects of Kemet religion, that's for you. You as long as it makes you a good, productive human being, and you treat everyone else the same that God treats you and loves you, I think that's fine. That's enough. I think, to move everyone forward, and to make sure that someone doesn't get swayed into a Mr. Samuels um, type of showmanship.
Absolutely. Wow. This was such an amazing discussion. I'm so thankful that we touched upon a lot of important topics tonight. To our listeners who tuned in, we appreciate it, even though we had some technical issues earlier. But I'm so thankful that touched upon a lot of important things. I'm going to be the first to say that yes, there will be a part 3. Gentlemen, I hope you guys are going to be on track with that. Yes, I get to raise the roof. All right. I find these discussions so insightful for me. If you notice, I just, ask the question, put it out there, do a transition, and I sit back and listen, because I know that I myself have learned so much as a woman, listening in on your inner thoughts and your transparency, your perspectives on, experiences men from day to day, and as Black men especially. So I definitely want to give each of you an opportunity to, share any last thoughts or insights. Also, there's those who are listening in who may want to be able to connect with you directly, or know about the platforms that you do have. So I want to give each of you an opportunity to share with us any last thoughts, and also how anyone in our audience can get in touch with you. We'll start with Dr. Cook.
Well, I'm not one to make note and highlight what I do in the community. I do what I do because I've been very blessed, and that's what my life is about: giving back. And I think everyone remembers a story about the young lady walking down the beach, putting a starfish back in the ocean, and making the difference just for that one starfish. And that's how everyone should look at life. Not everyone is going to be in the position we're in, but they can always be of influence. And no matter what type of minute influence you think you have, there's something called the butterfly effect, and it's going to help out everyone, even if it's just a smile. Me, I take it to the X level, the nth level, and that's just what I do. Um, I don't like to talk about it, but I'm out there all the time, seeing patients for free by the hundreds every year. And actually, during COVID, was by the thousands every year, because I've been very fortunate. And there's no way, as someone who looks like me, that was been blessed with the education I've gotten and received, that my life on this planet isn't going to be about giving back, especially to other people that look like me, because they haven't been given the type of life that other people have been given via institutionalized racism. So that's all I'll say about that. Give what you can, even if it's just a little bit. Thank you.
Dr. Cook, did just that. I reached out to him during COVID of his time in the
Yep.
union, came in and did podcasts. And personally, thank you if I haven't said thank
Yes. Absolutely. And Lamar?
Let me unmute myself. First of all, Shaneri, thank you so much. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? First of all,
Yes.
Shaneri, thank you again for this platform. I sincerely mean it. I know you had the idea to continue to do something to this extent, and you wanted to go higher in heights. And this is just a superb job. And so I want to give you a love deposit and thank you for all that you continue to do. And I say this openly with courage, with the fortitude, with the inspiration, and also how you're able to compile these questions so we can be able to, really get to the meat of things. And so thank you. For those that have been tuning in, I want to thank you so much. I really appreciate you, my family, my friends, my loved ones. I know a lot of folks are tuning in from Eastern Standard Time, to Central Time, Pacific Time. Folks are trying to figure out what time is best for them. And those that go back and watch the show, we thank you for taking the time to watch this show. If you're interested in supporting what I do a lot of different things, but I do have a clothing line. And if you're interested in supporting a Black-owned business, it's Christian-based. It's a Christian clothing line, and all we're trying to do is bring awareness to God, to excite, to encourage, and to unite people across the world. It's called KingdomBusinessClothing.com, KingdomBusinessClothing.com. You can check us out. You can buy. We have an array of different styles, from t-shirts to sweatshirts to shorts to hoodies. You can buy what you would like. And also, I've been blessed and fortunate enough to start a podcast soon entitled Intentional the podcast. And so I truly believe everything that we do has to have the proper intent. Who we allow in our space, our finances, the God we serve, even who we want to become in life. What's the intent behind it? And so I really thank each and every one of these individuals on the forum for the opportunity to share with me. And I do want to say this last thing, and I think it's crucial. I said earlier that we all have a divine assignment. I am a man of God, and I believe in Christ as the way. I know others may have different ideologies of how they feel, but at the end of the day, we all will have the final analysis of our lives. And the question should be, what have we done? And who have we inspired? And who have we changed and transformed? And you got to be able to answer that question in the final analysis of your life. And I think if you have not gotten to that place now, you can start today by making a difference. So be the difference. So thank you.
Certainly. All right, Jeff?
Shanieri, Dr. Cook, D, Lamar, it has been an honor being on being in this discussion with you. I am grateful for the opportunities that we've had to really connect with each other and even share our hearts, our experiences, and even allowing our scars to become somebody else's stars. That means even sharing the things that we've faced, the pain that we faced, and opening it up so that other people can receive healing too. I'm grateful to all of you. For those who would like to get in touch with me, I want to also thank my brothers and friends and sisters, those who are tuning in. And thank you so much for your support. So grateful. Grateful for a community. One thing I've definitely learned in the past couple of years, a man's strength doesn't just come from his own ability to endure and build himself up. His strength comes from his allies too. So I'm grateful for that. We all need battle buddies. For those who want to get in touch with me, goodmendoexist.org is my website as well. Again, we're a gentleman's lifestyle brand and movement. We create safe spaces for men to have community and brotherhood. Monthly, I have different events as well. And it's a clothing line through fashion, through brotherhood, through man empowerment. Goodmendoexist.org on Instagram, at Good Men Do Exist Official. And at MR Jeff Tyler, Mr. Jeff Tyler, and goodmendoexist.org, and on Instagram at goodmendoexist official. If you'd like to get in touch with me and our movement. So Thank you so much.
Excellent. And Duran.
First of all, Shanaria, I want to thank you for allowing me to be involved on your platform. Without this platform, I would have never met Brother Lamar. Of course, I know Dr. Cook in the community, and I also know Jeffrey. I think, especially in the Charles County community, folks know who I am. But one less step further, I feel the need to take us out in prayer. It's okay. Let us bow our head.
Absolutely.
Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for this opportunity to serve. But dear God, we want to thank you for the men that's on this line, but also we want to thank you for the men in the Charles County community and throughout the world. Dear God, we had a lot of women on this phone, on this call, with affirmations and encouraging us. We want to thank you for the women. It's just not about the men. But just most importantly, God, we want to just thank you and please help us to look for ways that we can love others specifically each day. In the matchless name of Jesus, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all who tuned in this evening. This will be available on replay on YouTube. Please share with others who you feel would benefit from hearing this discussion. Almost 2 hours long, but man, it was amazing. This was amazing. And I'm hoping, once we get that part 3 going, maybe even a part 4, that it'll be just as impactful as these first have been. If you like the video and watching on YouTube, please like. You can also subscribe to our channel as a health center. And we look forward to next time. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Thank you, Journey.
Thank you.